Welcome to the Antioch Podcast, designed to nurture knowledge, cultivate creativity, heal the heart, and strengthen for service. Thanks for listening, and welcome home.
Well, good morning, church. How are we doing today? Must be spring break. We're missing all of our college students, so y'all gotta fill in. They're always more excited. So, come on. I need some help this morning. So this morning, we're going to kind of jump back into the book of Esther. We're going through the book of Esther, and we're doing it at a pretty quick pace because it's kind of the way that you have to go through Esther. It's a story, and it's meant to be read as a story. And there's something that you miss if you take too much time going through it. But last week, I tried to open it up. I tried to introduce it and lay out kind of a perspective of what we're talking about in the book of Esther. And we looked at this idea of boldly caring. It's one of the main elements of this story is boldly caring. What does it look like for us to boldly care? Not just caring, but boldly caring. There's something different about it. Something intense, something powerful in that. And I want to track that a little bit more. So this morning, it's going to be a little bit different. I was supposed to do the first 4 chapters last week. Now, if you've ever heard me teach, that would be miraculous. So I did 2 chapters, but I still feel like the Holy Spirit was on it. That was still pretty amazing. Today, we need to go through chapters 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. I'm doing 5 chapters today, and it's actually going to happen. I'm going to proclaim it now in faith that we're going to get through these 5 chapters. But the first 2, we're going to read a lot of this together. So if you have your Bibles, open up to the book of Esther. And or their journal. Yeah, it's in your journals. We put this in your journals for you so you can read it there and take notes. Thank you to my lovely assistant. I appreciate it. All right. So, Esther 3. Now, before we start reading Esther 3, I need to highlight something that's very easy to miss as you're reading through this, and I think the context is really important. You're going to be hearing about Haman and Mordecai. Haman is about to be introduced into the story. So here's the story. Haman is a descendant of Agag, the Amalekite king. So I don't know if you remember the story. Hopefully you do. Bible story. Saul was supposed to destroy all of the Amalekites, and he ended up sparing Agag. He didn't do the job, and he also didn't kill all the cattle. And it's just a weird story, but it's there. And God was like, no, you were supposed to do this, and this is now going to cause trouble. Here's the trouble. Here's some of the trouble that it was going to cause. So Haman is a descendant of Agag, the Amalekite king, and Mordecai, obviously, is a descendant of King Saul. So what's happening here is, because you read this next part, and it's like, why do they, hate each other so much? This is a long feud that's been going. The Amalekites were the enemies to the Jews. And even though they're now in captivity to the Persians and the Medes and soon to the Babylonians and all that other stuff, even though that's the case, it's still the Amalekites are like the crosstown rivals. They're like, those are the bad guys. Those are the ones who've done so much horrible stuff to us. So that's going on in the background. There's this ancient feud that's part of this story. So there you go. There's a little bit of background for you. Let's jump into the story. I'm just going to read through this, and then we'll talk about it a little bit at the end of the chapter. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than all of the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him. But Mordecai would not kneel down, nor pay him honor. Then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated. for he had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. In the 12th year of the king Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, the pur, that is the lot, was cast in the presence of Haman to select a day and a month. And the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, there is a certain people dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will give 10,000 talents of silver to the king's administrators for the royal treasury. So the king took off his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. Keep the money, the king said to Haman, and do with the people as you please. Then on the 13th day of the first month, the royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out in the script of each province and in their language of each of the people all of Haman's orders to the king's satraps, the governors of the various provinces, and the nobles of the various peoples. These were written in the name of King Xerxes himself and sealed with his own ring. Dispatches were sent by couriers to the king's provinces in the orders to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so they would be ready for that day. The couriers went out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. Okay, we're going to pause here. And here I'm going to bring up this next boldly caring idea. This principle of boldly caring is not an easy one, but it is one that we have all been called to. I think it's something that we've all been created for. This idea of boldly caring is that you have to boldly care and love your enemies. I almost want to say you shouldn't have enemies, but Scripture even uses that language, and Jesus uses that language, because I think he knows our hearts, and he knows that this part of breathing air is you are going to have some people that you view as an enemy. Or maybe you try to stay in a position of love to them, but their position towards you is incredibly negative. So you might not consider them an enemy, but they consider themselves an enemy to you. Here's the thing that's important to pick up. And this is a weird thing about the book of Esther. We're going to talk a little bit more about this next week, I think. But the book of Esther and Mordecai don't always do the best thing. And I think it's important for you to know that. And let me just make sure I share that with you as your pastor. The Bible, in sharing stuff, isn't always prescriptive. Sometimes it's just descriptive. It's just telling you what happened. It's not saying this was a good thing. Like Abraham, trying to convince the Egypt ruler that his wife was his sister, and giving his wife away to multiple times to different people because he was afraid he was going to get killed. That wasn't a good thing to do. That was terrible. But it's what happened. And one of the most amazing things about the Bible, when you compare it with other religious books, is it does not hold back from these character flaws. It doesn't hold back from the incredible humanity. You have when you're trying to convince everyone that Jesus is Lord and all this stuff is happening, you have in Scripture itself, it says, and some of the disciples walked away. Some of the disciples began to deny him. Peter, the one that you're saying you're going to build the whole church on, you have him denying Jesus 3 times. You don't put stuff like that in there unless you're saying this is what actually happened, and we're just telling you what happened. So when we read through this stuff, it's okay to see some of the actions that the heroes of the story make. And I'm using these because Mordecai and Esther aren't the heroes of the story. God is the hero of the story. But he's working through them and he's working with them who are very imperfect. It's like, well, why doesn't God just use perfect people? Well, then he has no one to work with. Anyone in here perfect? I mean, I have messed up so many times. So one of the beautiful things about this is God does use imperfect people to accomplish his perfect plan. He does some amazing things through some not so amazing people. So I just want to give you freedom to read stuff like this and be like, that's pretty messed up. Yeah, it is. They've made mistakes. They're not perfect. And that should give you hope. The fact that the Bible doesn't try to hide that stuff is an incredible apologetic for it. Like, yeah, I know it is messed up. Let's try to do better. And if we were living according to the Spirit, we would. Keep in mind, they didn't have the Holy Spirit dwelling in them the way that you do. So y'all should be doing much better than they do. So I'll just leave that there. But speaking of doing much better, the one thing that you should be able to do that they couldn't is you should be able to love your enemies. All this heartache of the rest of the story and all would have been avoided if they could have just learned to forgive. If Mordecai could have just bowed down to Haman because of the position he held. And it's funny when you read commentaries because people don't want to believe that anyone in the Bible could do anything wrong. You read these commentaries that says, yeah, it's wrong for a Jew to worship someone else. He wasn't called to worship Haman. He was called to bow down. And you have Mordecai bowing before the king. You have him showing reverence to all these other people. Over and over, you have all these stories of them showing reverence and honor to those who are in charge, even if they're pagan leaders. It's because of who Haman was. It's like, oh, he's one of those Amalekites. I'm not bowing to him. It was pride that was getting in the way. He refused to forgive. He refused to let go of this family feud that had been going on for years and years and years. You guys, I don't know how to say it more clear, but you can't love God and hate your brother. You can't. You simply can't. It's impossible. We have to learn how to love our brothers and our sisters, and it has to start in here, and some of us aren't even good at that. But then beyond here, we're called and commanded, and this is boldly caring to go and to love our enemies. If you choose to love your enemy, here's what I've learned. They will no longer be able to remain an enemy in your heart. When you have someone that you see as an enemy and you start to pray for them, how you would want them to pray for you, and you start to try to understand things from their perspective, and you start to really sympathize with what they've gone through, they will not remain your enemy. It's impossible. Your heart will be changed as you pray for them. If you choose to love your enemy, eventually they will become your brother, even if only in your heart. You don't have to agree with them to actively seek what's best for them. There's a statement that Rick Warren once made, and it just wrecked me because I thought it was such a beautiful statement. He said, I can never lead an enemy to Christ, only a friend. So he chooses to see everyone that he comes into contact with as a friend. Because a friend I can lead to Christ. But I can never lead an enemy. If you see someone as an enemy, you don't have the capacity to share the gospel with them. Because sharing the gospel has to come from your heart, not from your head. It's not about knowing the right things to say. You love someone into salvation. You don't argue them into salvation. Now, argument comes in. I was saved through apologetics, but it was because people loved me. And there's a reason that there's the cliche saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You can have all the answers in the world, but if you're kind of a jerk, I don't care about your answers. I'll deny him no matter how obviously right it seems. Haven't you ever had someone that you're having an argument with and they said something that you agreed with, but you played the devil's advocate just because you don't like them? Oh, it's just me? Okay, sorry. You guys can pray for me after church. Here's a secret for you. Speaking of boldly caring. You can choose to love somebody even if they choose to hate you. And if there's one thing we should learn from watching Jesus, it's that. You can love somebody that you totally disagree with. And you can love somebody even if they hate you enough to crucify you. Literally. You can still choose, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. Esther 4. I gotta get through 5 chapters, y'all. Here we go. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly, but he was only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province in which the edict and order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's eunuch and female attendants came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs assigned to attend her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. Just pause 1 second. I just have to share, there's so many things I'm skipping, but I have to share this part just because I think it's really interesting. You know how Haman offered, I'm going to give you all of this money? It's like an insane amount of money. It's like 175 tons of silver. It's an insane amount, which they're like, how is he going to get that much money? He probably doesn't have that much money. His thought was, at least this is what they are assuming, is if he murdered all the Jews, he was going to take all of their property, sell it, and that would give him the money to be able to pay it. But then you're like, oh yeah, but King Xerxes says, oh yeah, don't worry about the money. That's fine. Just go ahead and do it. Yeah, it's just like a pleasantry. It's like when someone goes, oh, you didn't have to say that. You could say it again. It didn't mean, no, you don't actually have to pay me. He still wanted the payment, but like you had to say the thing to sound proper. So I guess this was a very Persian thing to do. They did this all the time. It's kind of like in a little bit you're going to see King Xerxes says to Esther, whatever you want up to half the kingdom. He's not going to give her half the kingdom. But it's just like one of those things you say. So when he was like, hey, you don't have to worry about paying me back. Yeah, you do. You still have to give me that money. I know I said you don't, which is why it's still part of the edict that they're going to have to pay that much money. Okay, sorry. I thought that was interesting, probably because I'm a Jew and it's money. So anyway, let's keep going. Sorry, there's my inappropriate statement of the day, or my first. Let's see. Verse 7. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show to Esther and to explain it to her. And he told him to instruct her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go into the king. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: "Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. And I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. Okay, first of all, can we just acknowledge how much Scripture celebrates the strength of women? It's an incredible thing that you have Esther being willing to give her life, because pretty much this is a death sentence for her to go and do this. And she's in a pretty good position. She's queen. She's pretty comfy. And Mordecai's like, "Don't think you're going to escape." She probably would have, because no one knew who she was. But here's something that Queen Esther understood, and it's part of boldly caring. It's my boldly caring idea. I think this is number 7, continued from last week. For you to really boldly care, you have to know your tribe. Who are your people? Who's your family that's worth who are the people that are worth living for and dying for in your life? Do you have that? I think this is one of the biggest tragedies of the last 100 years of our modern society. There's no understanding of a tribe, of having a people that you belong to, that are worth dying for. And honestly, harder usually is worth living for. There used to be a large perspective to that, but even down to the smallest element of it, the family unit, I don't know that we have this sense that my family is worth living for and dying for. And you have, listen, I'm a public school teacher for 26 years. I'm not anti-public school, but you have families that just send their kids off to be discipled by public schools. And I promise you, having been a public school teacher for 26 years, not a great place to have your children discipled. Or you want to make it sound a little bit better, Sunday morning you bring them to church and you send the kids into the class, and you're expecting a half hour of teaching with fruit snacks and goldfish to completely disciple your children. Okay, I know I'm going to make some people mad, but come on. If you can't live for your kids and take the time to disciple them and pour into their lives and get to know their friends and be the one that's teaching them about God and showing them what it looks like to live out a life with God, come on. And I pray that the hearts of parents would be turned back to their kids and kids to their parents. Sometimes the way I hear kids and hear college students, oh my gosh, I'm so old that college students are kids now. I just realized that. Oh my gosh, that's so frightening. I know. Okay, so I'm still consider myself I'm just post-college. That's where I'm at. That's my, so that's where I'm at, right? Okay, but to hear the way kids talk about their parents. Honor your mother and father so that it will go well with you and you'll have a long life. It's the only commandment with a promise attached to it. I mean, we don't even understand the tribe of our family group anymore. I was thinking about what is the greatest gift that Jesus gave us. And I was processing this a little bit, and I was thinking, okay, well, he gave us the gift of the Holy Spirit. He says, it's better for you if I go so I can send the Comforter to you. It's an amazing gift. Not to mention all the gifts of the Spirit. That's pretty amazing also. Hope. What an incredible gift hope is. Strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Amazing gifts. Salvation. Could there possibly be anything greater than salvation? I think the greatest gift that Jesus gave us was himself. He is our great reward, right? But when I think about that, he didn't just give himself to us. What he did is he invited us to be one with him. Right? That's different. He's not like, okay, let me give you myself, and I'm going to put that in you. He invited us to be one with him. He invited us to be part of his body. But the part that stood out to me as I was praying through this and thinking about it, it was part of his body means part of all y'all. We're all called to be part of his body. So the greatest gift he gives us is that we could be one in him, just like he is one with the Father. That we would be caught up. The community, the tribe was his great gift to us. I know we're so used to, oh, it's just me and Jesus. Listen, if you're in Jesus, it's not just you and Jesus. Because if you're in Jesus, you're in his body, and his body is made up of the family of believers. It's the whole tribe is his great gift to us. You guys are really quiet today. On tomorrow night and Tuesday is the celebration of Purim. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Purim, it's this Jewish celebration. It's actually prescribed in the book of Esther. We're going to see it next week when we take a look at it. But the celebration of Purim, or the festival of lots, is celebrating this whole story. And the salvation that came to the Jewish people, because they were about to be completely annihilated. And they were saved. And the way that this is celebrated is, first of all, it's a community celebration. All the other ones, all the other celebrations and the feasts, you can do at home just with your family. But Purim is meant to be celebrated with others. It's a huge community time, and it's just a raucous, joyful celebration. If you're not having an incredible, outrageous time, you're celebrating it wrong. So what happens is, in celebrating this, is you read through the book of Esther. You would read through it tomorrow night, and then also on Tuesday. You would get together with other people, and you'd read it out loud and have this huge celebration. And during the reading of it, as everyone's together, whenever you read through the story, when the name Haman comes up, everyone makes loud noises. You hiss, you shuffle your feet, you clap. Sometimes you have noise makers. You just those clapping things, those annoying clapping things that someone keeps giving to children. I don't know who gives them to children. I think it's the skee ball places gives those to children. Those should all go out of business. So you just make noise anytime the name is Haman is mentioned. By the way, I'm telling you this because we're going to practice this in just a moment. This is how we're going to get through the next 3 chapters. And it's meant to be an incredibly fun time of amazing celebration. You have 2 big feasts, typically. The 2 big feasts are because Esther, we're going to read through it. Esther is about to throw 2 big feasts. At these feasts, it's just part of the tradition, don't get mad at me, but part of these feasts is you're supposed to drink alcohol. And the saying goes, you're supposed to drink till you can't tell the difference between Haman and Mordecai. That's the joke, okay? But the idea is it's supposed to be a time of great joy and celebration. Because I know Americans, we're really caught up with the whole idea of drinking wine. It's just not like that anywhere else in the world. The other part of it is they do what's called a Purim spiel. You guys probably heard the Yiddish word spiel. Like, all right, give me your spiel. That means play or skit or act out type of thing. So I thought what might be a little bit fun today is we're going to do a bit of a Purim spiel. And we've been doing some improv lately. So I'm going to need 4 volunteers. All you're going to do is you're going to read the parts of either Haman, Esther, King Xerxes, or the others. So like any other part you're going to read. And you need to figure out a good voice to do for it. And you could try to act it out a little bit as you're reading it. I have them nice and highlighted for you to make this easy for you. Sorry, are we allowed to do this in church? Is this okay? You guys are all so serious today. Okay, so quickly, I need 4 volunteers. Letty, come on up here. Let's see. I'm just going to make you choose. Yep, you're going to have to randomly choose, so we'll see what you get. Okay, so, all right, pick one of these. All right, who are you?
Haman.
All right, you're Haman. Come up with a good Haman voice. All right, I need some more volunteers. Yeah, come on up here, Gilbert. Quickly. All right, I'm going to need one more, it looks like. Nice, you're King Xerxes. You got the crown on, so that works. You're the others. I need one more. Oh, perfect, you're Esther.
Let's go.
All right, so let me actually get behind you guys. You stand in front of me. And when it comes to your role, figure out what your voice is going to be. You might want to practice that a little bit. I don't know. I don't know if they need the mic. Just be loud. Can you be? Oh, okay. What, can
I don't
we?
want to deprive the live stream.
That's true. You don't want to deprive the live
I'm recording
stream.
this for all posterity.
That's right. Oh, yeah. We could use some of these. Can we use some of these? Cool. We'll just put one here between you guys. Perfect. Nice. All right. Oh, my goodness, guys. What was I thinking? All right, are we ready?
Yeah.
No. They're highlighted for you. Look, you guys, it's very simple. Made this nice and easy for you. All right, so for the rest of you, your job, and I think we're going to have the words up here. Perfect. Whenever I say Haman, you need to hiss or stomp your feet or something like that, okay? All right, so here we go. Ready? On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace, in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked,
"What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given to you."
If it pleases the king,
replied Esther.
let the king, together with Haman, come today to the banquet I have prepared for him. Bring Haman at
No, it's king. Esther, shh. King, go. Verse 5.
Bring Haman at once, the king said, so that we may do what Esther asks.
So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther,
"Now, what is your petition? It will be given to you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted."
Esther replied,
my petition and my request is this. If the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question.
Haman went out that day, happy and in high spirits. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, Calling together his friends and Zeresh his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had elevated him above all the other nobles and officials.
And that's not all.
Haman added,
I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave, and she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate.
His wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him,
Have a pole set up, reaching to the height of 50 cubits, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself.
somehow we've landed into the Holy Grail. I don't know. And say knee unto him. Sorry. This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the pole set up. That night the king could not sleep, so he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes.
What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this?
The king asked.
Nothing has been done for him.
His attendants answered. The king said,
Who is in the court?
Now, Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about impaling Mordecai on the pole he had set up for him. His attendants answered,
Haman is standing in the court.
Bring him in.
The king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked him,
What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?
Now Haman thought to himself,
Who is there that the king would rather honor than me?
so he answered the king,
For the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and the horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor, and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, This is what the man the king delights to honor.
Go at once.
the king commanded Haman.
Get the robe and the horse, and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended.
So Haman got the robe and the horse. He rode Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him,
This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor.
Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief, and told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had happened to him. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him,
Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin.
While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. And as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king asked,
Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted.
Then Queen Esther answered,
If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king.
King Xerxes asked Queen Esther,
Who is he? Where is he? The man who has dared to do such a thing.
Esther said.
An adversary of the enemy, this vile Haman.
Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed,
Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house?
As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said,
A pole reaching to a height of 50 cubits stands by Haman's house. He has sent it up for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king.
The king said,
Impale him on it.
so they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. All right, let's give him a hand. Great job, man. Wow, King Xerxes is sexy. Hello, Esther. I love how chill you were. Will he even molest the queen? Okay. Why do we make noises every time that Haman's name is mentioned? And it's an interesting tradition. What was Haman's biggest sin? Now, the obvious answer seems to be he tried to annihilate all the Jews. That seems clearly the worst sin he could have possibly committed. But keep in mind, that attempt, that action was based on something that was prior. It was based on hatred. It was based on racism. But here's the thing, and this is going to sound crazy. None of that is the biggest sin. All of that is just the smoke of the fire. All of that is just the consequence of the biggest sin. The biggest sin that Haman had, every time I say Haman, I'm worried you guys are going to start making noise again. I just realized, I get nervous every time I say it. The biggest sin that Haman committed, no! You're not helping my fears. All of those are symptoms. The sin was pride. We play lip service to how bad pride is. And I'm telling you, church, family, we have to begin to see pride for the sin that it is. It is horrible. The things that come from pride are things like racism and hatred, are things like the attempt to exterminate a people. It's all from pride. And when we think through history and we try to figure out who are some of the most prideful people in the world, Hitler definitely rises to the top because his pride was put in check when he didn't get into art school. When you think about when you go through history and you look at the people who did crazy stuff, it's because their pride was enraged. I was looking, I was trying to look up the verse because I couldn't remember its address. Anyone else have problems with the addresses for the verses? I always forget where they're at. But the verse, God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. You guys have all heard that. I know, I'm a bad pastor. I probably shouldn't confess this, but I'm just being honest with you. I didn't realize that both James and Peter quoted those exact words. Both of them did. That's crazy. That word for word, they both quoted that exactly. So two of the disciples, two of the apostles, if you consider how big of a deal that is. After spending all this time with Jesus, they both saw pride being this thing that was such a big deal that we need to make sure we talk about this. You have Jesus talking about it. All of them are kind of drawing from Proverbs 3:34. Satan's big downfall was pride. That's what made Satan Satan, was pride. And we play around with it like a toddler playing with a loaded gun. Because pride is a big deal. And we cannot give it any quarter in our lives. We've got to be good about eliminating it, about humbling ourselves, about when pride rises up, confessing it to others. You have to be very intentional about this. This is my last boldly caring statement for today. Boldly caring is impossible for the proud. You cannot boldly care for others if you're always completely focused on yourself. Now, you could care for others, but you can't boldly care. Because the way you'll care for others is in a way that'll bring glory to you. You'll go on the mission field, but spend your entire time taking pictures with kids so you can post it on social media. When you give to the poor, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. When you pray, don't be like the hypocrites that go out and pray in the street corners, wearing the giant phylacteries. Go into your closet and pray to your Father who's in heaven. Guys, we have got to learn to be humble. We have got to learn to eliminate pride from our lives. And we can't play around with it. The way, as I was mentioning, the way that we celebrate Purim, it's an incredible, fun time of great rejoicing and celebration. And I'm looking forward to celebrating this week, and I hope you all find some places that you can go to celebrate. But the big celebration comes when family and friends, when your community, when your tribe gathers around the table. And you have the feast. This incredible feast. And so that's how we're going to finish today, is we're going to finish with the Lord's Feast. Could there be a celebration that should bring us greater joy? I know we're used to taking communion with a very repentant position, and there's a place for that. But I think probably we could be borderlining on the realm of pride if we make communion about how bad we are instead of how good He is. And this morning, I want to celebrate communion. I want to come and participate in the love feast, in the communion of the Lord, that we get to be one with Him and one with one another because of what He did. Because He came and His body was broken for us, we could be made whole again. Because His blood was poured out, we can take of the new cup of redemption and the cup of this new covenant. I don't know what could bring greater joy than that. So this morning, I want to encourage you. Take a moment right now. And if there's heaviness, I want you to set it aside. This communion this morning isn't about you and how broken you are. It's about how broken He was for our sake, so that we don't have to be broken anymore, so that we could be made whole again.
Thank you for listening. To continue the journey, you can find us online at iamantioch.com or join us next Sunday.